Thanks so much to our social inclusion powerhouse trio, Derval, Dara, and Ailish. It's great to hear the work that's being done, and it's great to hear the commonalities in the three organizations. And ultimately, I think we all have very similar goals. And I think one of those goals is to make people compliant with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Perfect transition. Hey, Alistair, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, really pleased to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us. I know you're a busy guy.
So I can't think of anything more fun being busy with than with you folks. So can you see my
Perfect.
screen? Has that
Yeah,
worked? Seamless
that's a
review.
nice, is that Cinderella's slipper there? It's nice
As,
looking.
as my slipper.
Oh,
Okay,
perfect. Yeah, go ahead whenever you're ready, Alistair. Thank you.
thank you. What I'm going to do, I've got the slides on Google Slides. I updated them very slightly from what I'd already sent through. So the slides are on there. You probably just want to bookmark them for the moment, but you're welcome to follow through as I go or watch the screen. So, Cinderella, just in case, if I am not being entirely inclusive, I'm not going to assume that everybody knows the Cinderella story. So let's just recap, quick recap. The plot summary for Cinderella: hardworking girl at the bottom of the family pecking order, gets all the unglamorous jobs. No thanks, no recognition. The stepsisters are locally recognized. Everybody invites them to the balls and so on, but the stepsisters don't let Cinderella out. The fairy godmother reconfigures the mice and the pumpkins, a very good bit of assistive technology skill there, to enable access to the ball, so very inclusive. Some non-standard footwear results in Cinderella being finally recognised by the authorities. This story has resonance in all these different cultures. There are versions of Cinderella: Greek, Roman, Egyptian, Persian, French, and so on. So there are very few areas of the world where the Cinderella story does not exist in one kind or another. And I think the key thing for assistive technology is that you are very often feeling like the Cinderellas. In the English language, and I'm sure in the Irish language, Cinderella has become a metaphor for somebody whose attributes, whose contributions, whose work is not properly recognised for the value that it brings. So that's where I want to start off, because if we take this metaphor of Cinderella and we say, okay, without pushing it too far, who are the ugly sisters in further education or higher education? Or so we'll call it ugly sistering just to be consistent with the story. Could be ugly brothers as well. I'm going to give you some examples, and then I'm going to ask you, as I go through those examples, I'm just going to ask you to reflect, oh yeah, in my own practice, do I deal with this? And we'll have a Mentimeter in a few moments' time where we'll get a sense as to which of the different, I think there's about 8 or 9 examples of ugly sistering where effectively, because of the work of somebody else not being done properly, you are left in the position of sweeping up and making good the problems. So I'm going to go through these different examples, and as you go through, just make a mental note for the activity in a moment as to which ones you think, oh yes, I remember dealing with that. So the first one is the ugly sistering in the sense of a technophobic lecturer scanning an old photocopied resource and uploading it as an image PDF, and then your neurodivergent students are trying to use text-to-speech with it. Your visually impaired students are trying to use text-to-speech. Someone's trying to change the background color. Absolutely nothing will happen because it's been uploaded as an image alone. I've got a couple of examples here that are particularly interesting. This bottom one on the left, it says employment tribunals, and it's actually a court document from an English case from Reading County Court, where a blind user or a blind student was trying to access some law courses. I think it was law courses. And no, it was project management courses they were doing. And the content was not accessible. And again, it was this sort of thing, uploaded PDFs that were just scans. And the court found in favour of the claimant, and the Institute of Project Management was fined. And then the court, all the documentation, all the arguments, as is standard, uploaded online. What was interesting in this particular one and really piqued my interest was that when I read online, it is a scanned PDF. It is merely an image of the court papers. So a beautiful irony there of the court actually breaking exactly the same laws that they were fining the Project Management Institute for breaking. On the right-hand side, just slightly different, but it's interesting from the perspective that the National Health Service in the UK has an accessible information standard, which many disability groups fought very hard to get in place. So all communication via National Health Service channels should meet the National Information, the Accessible Information Standard. This is something I received, an appointment I received recently. There is the PDF of the appointment that I received. It's not only a scanned PDF, and a badly scanned one at that, it's also loaded sideways. Now, I happen to know how to sort that, but there may be less experienced users trying to read this on a phone, no idea what to do with this content. So here you have even the right legislation framework, the cultural framework, accessible standards in place, but it's still a problem. So that was the first one. Let's look at the second example. And the second example is almost as vexing. It's where you get staff who are not technophobic, but they are technophilic, and they absolutely love playing around with the latest gadgets, the latest toys, whatever it may be, the latest formats. I've come across many examples where people had perfectly good online content, and then they come across flip books or Issue, and there's various brands, but basically it's an online flip book. And the most astonishing thing about it is that when you click the arrow left or right to move on or backwards, it goes as if it's a page moving. That is the only vaguely useful thing about it. It gives you audio feedback that you've changed a page. The rest of it is awful as a reading experience, even for sighted people. But try doing text to speech with that, try magnifying and having all the content still on the one page. It just doesn't work. Try changing the line spacing, try changing the color background, doesn't work. And yet people take perfectly good formats and then put it into this inaccessible format because it's new and it's exciting and they've found out they can do it. So that's the other kind of ugly brother, ugly sister example. This is a common one where a lecturer puts loads and loads of information into their PowerPoints because they want the students to have all the relevant detail, which is great, but it makes it very hard to read. PowerPoint is probably not the format you want to be looking at that level of density on. And then the colours are terrible and the contrasts are awful. Yes, it looks quite good if you are not red-green colourblind, but it's actually really difficult to read if you are. And then there's even an image behind it, which means that the contrast is constantly varying. If you do have contrast issues and you're reading text on an image, it's very difficult. So those can be really difficult. And I've even come across lecturers with their PowerPoints with little ants walking backwards and forwards across the bottom. And I say, why did you put that in there? What was the learning objective for that? Oh, it's just to keep them interested. I think if you need ants to keep them interested, there's probably something wrong with the lesson. Here's a fourth example. This is where you have really long Word documents. Here's an example. Again, I'm using examples that I found in real life, just in my own work. Here's an example of a 7-page document on background to hair, and I want to navigate that. Perhaps I've got a print impairment, dyslexia, all sorts of different ways where you might simply want to say, okay, I don't want to read 7 pages to get to the bit on hair conditioner. I want to go to the navigation pane and just click on the hair conditioner heading. And you get there, and there is no hair conditioner heading. What's even more confusing is there are other weird headings that appear to have come from nowhere because you didn't put them in. The lecturer didn't put them in. Basically, what's happened here is the lecturer used no heading styles, so there's no navigation by headings. But what they did do, in a couple of places, they put a list in, and Word was clever enough to know, oh, lists are structural entities, so I'll put in the headings for the list, or put the titles of the lists. And that was it. So from a perspective of somebody trying to get useful information, really difficult. Here's Ugly Sister 5, long PDF documents. The same kind of problem with PDF documents. What's really helpful is if all the headings in the document are tagged appropriately for bookmarks. It's very easy if you export a document from Microsoft Word and you've done proper headings. There's a little options in the export dialog to use headings as bookmarks, turn the headings into bookmarks. And if you do, that's brilliant. If you don't do that, it makes it extremely difficult to navigate that long PDF if there's no headings in there. Equally, here on the right hand side is a Department for Education PDF in the UK context, and I was using it with a screen reader. It's a very long document, no heading level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6, no lists, no links. A very difficult document to navigate unless you've got full vision. Here's another issue though, the reading order. If you take the experience of a screen reader user and you listen to some of your PDFs, you can get some really interesting things. Now, it's not at all surprising that a large number of disabled users drop out at each, or disabled students drop out at each phase of education. So from secondary to further, from further to higher. There's a large dropout rate, larger than there is for non-disabled students. And this is one of the reasons, and particularly for visually impaired students, is because of the poor experience that you have that makes you think you're not as clever as you are. So if I listen to this a little bit from an official government information on encouraging e-portfolios, the use of e-portfolios to be inclusive and to improve education, but just listen to what it says. The actual screenshot is below. There's the two columns, but what I actually hear when I read this with a screen reader is e-portfolios provide a way of looking at learning and the outcomes, connectivity and network infrastructure of learning for the long-term benefit of the learner. For institutions, the provision of a national e-portfolio support system will require it is more about changing culture to support personalising a sound, common or interoperable infrastructure between all users. When I've read that paragraph, when I've listened to that paragraph, perhaps as a print impaired user or as somebody using a screen reader, I think I haven't understood a word of that. I don't even understand what the sentence or the paragraph is trying to get at. And that's just simply because there was no reading order specified in this particular PDF. And so it read right across the first line of the first column, first line of the second column, second line of the first column, second line of the second column, and so on. It made a nonsense of something that was not nonsense. The problem is when disabled users are trying to access content with their assistive technologies and that content is not actually understandable to them, you know, the first thing they blame, but they don't immediately think, I bet my tutor hasn't put it together accessibly. The first thing they think is, I'm not very good at this, I don't understand it. Here's another example, PDFs. I hate PDFs, as some of you will know already. Actually, personally, I use them quite a lot. I like having things downloaded locally, but I hate the fact that they are so unpredictable in their accessibility. So if I need high magnification with a PDF, I have PDFs that regularly do not reflow as they should do when I magnify them and I reflow them. In Adobe Reader, it's very easy. View, zoom, reflow, and then magnify to whatever you like, and it should all reflow in order to fit the viewing window that you're looking at. However, what you often find on the left here, you can see very clearly that sentence at the top, number of glacial, and is not compatible with the sentence at the bottom, river to deposit. So basically a whole chunk of the page has disappeared under the page break. I don't necessarily know that it's disappeared. I do in this case. There are some times where the sentence might actually work, but not be entirely sensible, but work enough that you don't realize you've missed out several paragraphs. On the right hand side, this is quite common in a number of PDFs. Just the PDF strips out the gaps between. So these are some of the key issues that our students, your students, are dealing with on a daily basis. Their assistive technology will take them some of the way, but actually all of this works on the GIGO principle, garbage in, garbage out, and you cannot yet get an assistive technology that will take a really poorly accessible piece of content and actually make it properly accessible. Maybe we'll get there one day, but not yet. And the example here, we've got two more examples. This example is one reason why it's going to be very difficult to rely on AI doing all this. Here's an example of an image-rich resource. This is from a higher education nursing course. And we've got some really quite complicated imagery there. And there is no alternative text with it. And to be honest, alternative text would not do it anyway, because alternative text only works for maybe 100 to 200 characters, maybe a paragraph or so at most, because a screen reader can't navigate through alternative text in the sense of you can't have headings in alternative text, you can't have bulleted lists in alternative text. You just have a stream of information from the beginning to the end. So if you decided to put a really long alternative text, it just becomes really difficult to make head or tail of. So images are complex, and we've got some guidance. Some group of UK universities worked with me. We've put together some guidance on complex images, which we can point to later. But the key thing is that even with images that are less complex than this, with images that could be easily described in the PowerPoint slide, in the PowerPoint field notes, a description underneath, perhaps a paragraph in the body text, they often are simply not there. Oh, that was it. That was it. So it's not two more examples. That is it. So what I'm going to ask you to do now is to go to menti.com, and there's, if you want to do that in a separate window, so menti.com, and there is the code 8388981. If I keep that there for a minute or two, I just want to get a sense within this audience where your key issues are, what you have come across most of all. Let's just see. And I'll bring my version up on the screen. Complex images and PowerPoints are coming out quite strongly at the moment. Doing an exercise like this can be very useful, especially if you do this in-house, in an in-house training session. It can be very useful at highlighting some of the key training needs that people might have. Sorry, let me put the code back. The code is on the screen there, 83889815. I'll pop that in here as well, Elizabeth. So we got most people in there. Perhaps a couple more. Now, perhaps one of the most interesting things about this is that you might have thought from the beginning, and I might have thought from the beginning, I think I did think from the beginning, I bet there's one or two that are way bigger problems than anything else. What's interesting though is that actually they're all problems. All we've got from 3.1 to 3.7. There's quite a narrow range there. And basically, most people are experiencing quite a lot of issues with getting their students the fluent, friction-free experience that they deserve and need in their teaching. Okay, where does all of this fit in? Let's get back to the title here, the European Accessibility Act. These are really common problems. You've just identified that yourself. There are two fairy godmothers in this Cinderella story. The first one, and again, I won't assume that everybody is completely up to date with what the European Union accessibility of websites, public sector bodies legislation was. So this came in a couple of years ago in the Irish context. And broadly speaking, it puts a set of standards that should apply to all online content, digital content, whether that's emails, whether that's lesson materials, whether that's the platform on which the lesson materials are presented. But it talks about this set of web content accessibility guidelines, WCAG for short, and they were originally, it was version 2.1, because they've evolved as time's gone on, because the first ones were 1999. So it's actually astonishing that here we are 26 years later and we're still talking about this. The first guidelines were available a quarter of a century ago. Then there was version 2, which has slightly more checkpoints. And then version 2.1 was the one that probably most people are trying to match in an Irish context. But version 2.2 has been released, and this guidance, the accessibility requirements, are now notching up to 2.2, which has got a few more extra elements in, mainly to do with mobile devices. But we're now on version 2.2 of the Web Content Guidelines, and we're on level AA. So level A is really basic. That doesn't fit any of the legal frameworks or requirements, but it's a helpful thing for developers to know that's the very basic stuff that you should be doing. And if you don't do that, you simply will have people cannot access your content. AA is the sort of the achievable intermediate. AAA is enhanced accessibility, but actually incredibly difficult to meet in many of the complex environments that education works in. So we're looking at version 2.2 AA. That's all you need to know about it, because if your job is supporting students, then you do not have to be an expert on all of these. Just if I go to a garage and I say, I think I've got a problem with my engine, they don't say to me, where do you think it is? What computer code do you think it is? I don't know, that's your job. I drive. It's your job to find out what the problems are. And it's just the same here. Don't ever feel that you can't talk about digital accessibility because you don't understand the standards. That's not the case. You are the driver, you're not the mechanic. So that first legislation, that first fairy godmother, has been really helpful at getting attention. The problem is it's like a tiger with no teeth. It's full of good intention, but if you don't meet the requirements, nobody goes to jail, nobody gets fined. You might get a reprimand by the National Disability Authority, but that's about as far as it will go. The second fairy godmother is really a fairy godmother with teeth, if you can imagine that. This European Accessibility Act, and I've got the Irish statute number there if you wanted to look it up, which I'm sure you don't. This is different in the sense that the compliance authorities that look after this, that actually make you comply, they have the power to issue a direction to comply. This is not a request. This is not, if you can do your best and see if you can improve the accessibility of your VLE in the next 6 months, I'll be really pleased. This is a direction to comply. Individual consumers can take action against businesses in Irish courts. Where we see business here, read educational institutions as well, where the consumer, read student, believes the business is not complying with the regulation. We've just seen a whole load of examples of where businesses are not complying. The business of education is not complying with the requirement to make accessible content available to students. And you've all just ticked the appropriate boxes to say, actually, I'm coming across these problems. This act is actionable throughout Europe. It is. And then the individuals can bring proceedings directly and be supported by interest groups. Now, the really important thing of that is that means it's not this one student thinking, have I got the energy to either complete my course and graduate, or the energy to complain and bring a proceeding? I've got the energy to do one or the other, but not both. Okay, actually, I want to get a degree. The individual no longer has that same level of pressure on them because they can be supported by interest groups. So an individual could go along to your local blind society and say, I'm having a terrible problem accessing the content in my further education course or my higher education institute. Can you help me? And they then can start stepping in there, and you can get interest groups then working together, collaborating to bring a case. There's a useful summary there by Mason, Hayes and Curran, some Irish lawyers, solicitors. There are other Irish lawyers and solicitors as well, but that's a useful online summary. So what matters now is that there are consequences of non-compliance in a way that there were never consequences before. You could have a summary conviction, a fine of 5,000 euros, or imprisonment up to 6 months, or both. That really changes the stakes. There's two kinds of conviction within the kind of court. Well, I don't know if this is just the Irish legal system or more generally, but a summary conviction is where somebody brings a complaint, and depending on the size of the complaint, you may get what we've got here, this fine of £5,000, imprisonment up to 6 months. A conviction on an indictment is where you've got a much more serious level of non-compliance, where it could be that nobody's done anything, even since the public sector bodies regulations came in. Nobody's done anything, nobody's even checked. There's been no audits on the VLE, no audits on the website, so significant non-compliance or a larger impact on consumers or repeat offending. So something like that, a fine up to 60,000, imprisonment up to 18 months, or both. There are personal impacts in that it's not just the reputation of the organisation may be tarnished. A company director, a manager, secretary or other officer could be found guilty of an offence. And history matters in this. So one of the safest ways of trying to prove due diligence, because I'm not going to pretend that getting an entire organisation with perhaps thousands of staff uploading content on a daily basis, getting all of that squeaky clean with accessibility is not easy. But you can prove due diligence by having the policies in place, having the quality assurance in place, having done the auditing, having done the staff training, having made certain training perhaps compulsory, so that nobody can say, I never knew that was important. So history really matters, and making sure that your organisation are able to prove due diligence could be really important. And this is where you come in, helping take this message further forward, because this applies not just to the website. This applies to your learning materials, your learning management system, your exams, your assessment, any of that's taking place online, your library system, your e-commerce system. This is much bigger than the public sector bodies work. This goes way beyond what people have been looking at up to now. And people haven't always engaged fully up to now because there hasn't been that sense of a strong penalty if you don't. So Cinderella suddenly matters. And you, as a group of people working in assistive technology or disability support, you suddenly become something rather special. A glass shoe is incredibly unique. Okay, only one person's going to wear a glass shoe with comfort and safety. You, as people working in assistive technology, you know what the impact is on learners. You know how much frustration there is because content isn't available in the right format, in the right way, at the right time. You know how disabled users that you support experience barriers. You are now in a unique position that nobody else in the organization is in. You can take that experience, and instead of it being, I suppose it's my job. No, it's not your job. It is your job in a way, but it's actually really important that somebody else is understanding this job, because your job title has changed. On the 28th of June, your job title will change. You are no longer the irritant that annoys the senior leadership team by complaining at poor quality staff training, at inaccessible systems, whatever it might be that your favourite complaint is in support of your students. You are now the consultant who keeps them out of prison. And that's incredibly important. The best resources, I've got some links at the end that I shall give you where you can follow up some of this. So I did mention in the description of the session that is UDL an ugly sister? That was designed to be a bit provocative, but only a bit. UDL is fantastic. I love UDL. I think it's brilliant. It's an excellent framework for inclusive practice. The problem is, quite often, people get the wrong end of the stick and they think, okay, UDL's great. I don't really know how to make accessible Word documents or accessible PowerPoints or accessible videos. And frankly, I haven't got the time to learn, but I know how to make PowerPoints and Word documents and videos and scan PDFs. So I'll make sure there's one or the other and people can choose between. But if your multiple means of representation means that you've got an inaccessible PowerPoint, a flip book online and a scanned PDF, you have become an ugly sister, because you've now created 3 compliance failures, whereas before you might only have had 1. So the thing about UDL is making sure, and in fairness, this is within the UDL framework, and information is about making content accessible, but it's not highlighted as much as I think it should be. And the key thing with UDL is making sure that you are designing accessibly, whatever format you're looking at, whatever multiple mean of representation you're looking at, or multiple means of expression, making sure that accessibility, digital accessibility, is core when you're using digital content and systems. So tips for Cinderellas, and this is where we come back to some of the questions there. A really important tip is to consider the whole student life cycle. I've done a lot of work for different universities and colleges doing mystery shopper journeys, where I say, give me one of your best online modules or your best teaching modules, give me access to it for a week, and I'll take a pan-disability perspective and I'll work through, and I'll say, these are the bits that worked technically, these are the bits that didn't, these are the bits that worked pedagogically, because inclusion's about pedagogy and teaching quality as much as it's about the technical aspects. And we can do that and then report on that. Get somebody to do that within your context, or just get anybody with some assistive technology experience to try the whole process from, okay, I authenticate to the VLE, and then I've got to go to the library because there's a particular book I'm using. So how does the library authentication work? If you ever want an amusing way of spending some time, You might want to look at the password game at some point. So this is the experience of a disabled user. I'm going to say, okay, ahead, it must include number, okay, 2025, must include uppercase, okay, so I'll go back and make that A. Good. Oh, it's got to include a special character, and, oh, the digits must add up to 25, so that adds up to 2 and 0, that's 9. So if I have a 9, that's 18, and 7, great. Oh no, it's got to include a month of the year, and so on. I think there's 35 challenges in this, and it gets more and more obscure as you go through it. But that is what it feels like for some users with some logging onto some systems in potentially your institution, where things are, the password has to change every 90 days and it's got to have 16 letters, of which there's 3 uppercase and 2 lowercase, and so on. So think about those things as well. And let's go, there's a couple of other bits I want to look for. So consider the whole student journey from login and cookies. Can you dismiss the cookie banner if you can't use a mouse, for example? Define assistive technology widely. Now, unfortunately, because of other commitments, I've got to very little of the ahead sessions, but the little bit that I have heard and overheard, you do that anyway. And so it's just, Dara was talking this morning about his kettle. No, it wasn't. Dara's air fryer was an assistive technology. Somebody else's kettle was an assistive technology. We were getting a bit off-piste, but it's great to think like that. So look at the Google ecosystems. There's a link there to the kind of main Google guidance on Chrome accessibility, Android accessibility, likewise for Microsoft and Apple. Very often, the things our students need are becoming more and more incorporated in the tools that they're using anyway. So just don't make the mistake of accidentally missing it, because if you don't know about it, it might be harder for them to know about it. Why would they know about it anyway? So keep in your communities, keep sharing good things. Explore plugins that help you with the hardest thing of all. So the hardest thing of testing is not testing by changing the color. All of us can perhaps tell whether the color's changed. But the hardest thing for your average assistive technology / disability / e-learning person, the hardest thing is to think, what would that look like as a screen reader user? Because I don't know, unless I'm a screen reader user and I haven't got the skills and I haven't got the time or access to a screen reader. So there's a really nice little plugin that's called Navigate Like a Screen Reader. And that doesn't cover everything, but I've got a link, again, the link's on the slides there. If I open this up, here we are. So I've just gone to my local county council page. What are the key things for a screen reader user? The key things for a screen reader user are being able to navigate through the system and know where you are and what you're supposed to do with it. So landmarks is one way you can do that. That's almost kind of regions of a page. It says, oh, this is the cookie section. This is the navigation skip links. This is a header. This is a breadcrumb navigation. That's really good, because that's what my screen reader user would hear. They would hear things read out, navigation or nav breadcrumbs, and they would know, that's a breadcrumb trail, so I can come back to that if I want to rapidly go to a different part of the routeway where I've already come. Equally, they can go on headings. Okay, heading 1, heading 2, underneath heading 2, a couple of heading 3s. That's looking good. Oh, they're all heading 3s there. That's fine though. I can rapidly, as a screen reader user, I go down through the headings. That's the bit I'm interested in, educating your child at home. I listen to that heading, click the enter key, and I'm there. Likewise, links. Do any of these say here or click here? Because if they do, it gives me no information. So these are all useful. They are all unique. They are all meaningful. So as I listen to those links as a screen reader user, I would get to a bit teacher training and development and think, oh yeah, that's the link I want. And I haven't had to read through paragraphs and paragraphs of text in order to get to the link that takes me where I want to go. And lastly, form controls. If there are forms on the page, you don't want to be trying to work out what the code is on the page to see whether the form is properly constructed. This just tells you what a screen reader user would hear as they tab through those different forms. They hear a submit button, search by name. That's meaningful. About, okay, that not quite sure. Miles from, yes, I think that's miles from where I am or something. But again, you can look, if any of these just say unlabeled, you've got a problem. So it's a very quick and easy way of exploring some of the things that you might otherwise find difficult. And the last thing is to make sure that you're advocating for some kind of automated testing that can feed into quality assurance. Automated testing is not a be-all and end-all, doesn't always work, or it can work very well for some things, but doesn't work for things that need humans to interrogate and interpret. But do advocate that people don't only get the tools like Blackboard Ally or Brickfield Accessibility Tool, get those in your institution, but then use them to find out whether you're getting better or worse, and use them to challenge practice where it's poor. And that's it from me. So if you have any easy questions, I'd be delighted to hear them.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alistair. Really wonderful session. A lot of practical tips as well, which is, I think, always useful. There is one hand raised with a Jen. Can you hear me, Jen?
Hi, yeah, I can hear you. Thanks. Hi, Alistair. Fascinating presentation. Thank you so much. I could listen to you all day. I understand that maybe you're not a employment law specialist or anything like that, but could I just ask you a question? You said that consumers can take an action against businesses in court if they believe the business is not complying with the regulations.
Yeah.
Does that include private businesses?
It does, but there is a limit on the business size. So again, this is getting into the detail. I've got links there on the slides. So if you, what I'll do, I'll put the links back in there so that you can find that easily. And I did promise you a couple of other things. So yeah, so it includes all businesses, but the issue, there is a kind of issue of manageability and a reality check and a political kind of expedience check, where if you've got a small business, like a local bakers or something that have got a website and so on for ordering your sandwiches, that whether it comes under the EAA depends on the size. Now I can't remember whether it's the number of employees or whether it's the turnover, but it is covered in the links, and so have a look at that. There's also, let me just give you these two things. I'm sorry I can't be more specific than that.
No, it's definitely more than I know anyway, Alistair, thank you.
Let me just give you these links. Just trying to find where the chat pane's gone. It's hiding from me. I'll stop the share for the minute. That's good. I can see the chat pane.
Perfect. And other people if you have any further questions, you're welcome to either put them in the chat or raise your hand or use the Q&A function.
So there's the slides in there, and just the final one. On LinkedIn, there is an EAA kind of questions and answers. So if you're on LinkedIn, this is a useful link for you to have a look at.
Very useful. All the resources, Alistair, you're full of resources for us. Perfect. Might just wait a minute or so to see if there are any further questions. But yeah, really useful information there, Alistair, which I think people are gearing up and getting ready for the act to come in. Everyone's ready, I think. Perfect. Just a lot of thank yous in the chat there too, Alistair. So thank you once again from ahead and from all the attendees today for a wonderful session.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, hope you enjoy the rest of your day, Alistair.
And I hope everybody enjoys their new job role after the 28th of June.
Keeping us out of prison.
Exactly.
Perfect. Thanks again, Alistair.
Take care.